Dear students, good morning. Welcome back to Perspectives by RB. In Pursuit of Lakshmi, this is what we are discussing this week. This book is written by Rudolph and Rudolph. It is related to political economy of India. The topic which I am going to discuss today, it is related to demand groups. So demand groups and pluralist representation. If you see in your syllabus, pressure groups, formal informal associations, that is what is the topic. So everywhere, what is a pressure group? This is what is dealt. What is the formal and informal dimension? And what are the various perspectives related to their functioning in Indian context is not being dealt. So this book is going to give us these insights. And second thing is, recently farmers movement has happened. So because of this movement, I wanted to study the history of farmer movements in India. How did they create an impact on the political system? So in searching for various books in my personal library, I thought this book has much important information compared to this. I want to disclose you one thing. I have got 2,700 plus books library, and this book was actually gifted by one of my friends, and it has got very relevant information for today. Now, what we are going to discuss, again, I have one request for you. Don't buy these books. Don't try to mug up them. I'll be giving you the gist of these books as a notes in laex.in/CivilsPrep on that particular website. And you can go there and collect that notes and update your pressure groups or civil society notes. So don't mug up this. This is written in a complex verbatim, and you will be more confused to read this rather than understanding it. So let's go for the perspective part of it. What are pressure groups? The groups which are working for the interests of its own masters or interests of its own members. We call them as pressure groups. Now these pressure groups are actively involved in lobbying in the United States of America. They are also called interest groups. You can see the impact of lobbying of gun manufacturers in the United States. They are able to align the policy to their advantage. Now, how these pressure groups or interest groups are expected to serve the collective good? That is my question. So we expect that different groups, when they are trying to influence the policy outcomes, they try to balance each other. So because of this balancing of one group's power by the other groups, it leads to something called as a genuine or else a fair policy outcome. But what will happen when these groups are of unequal size? When we have too many small groups on one side and one big organized structured group on the other side, this is what is the question. If you take gun manufacturers, it is one single large group association, National Rifle Association. So such a situation is able to serve collective good or not? That is the first question. And second is, does we have strong interest groups in India? If you take trade unions, CII, FICCI, these are said to be the strong interest groups. Are they really strong in India? So here we need to distinguish in India between interest groups and the demand groups. What are strong in India are the demand groups rather than the interest groups. So now, I am talking about two types. One is called command politics. The next is demand politics. So these demand groups, India Against Corruption is the example, is more about demand politics. Interest groups, they work more closely with the state and they are more about command politics. In these circumstances, interest groups, to what extent are able to influence the policy outcomes in India? That is the first question. And second, what is the difference between interest group and demand group? Now, if you take, these are structured organizations. They are bureaucratized. So they have a professional and technical understanding of an issue, and they depend more or less on an expertise towards arguing or towards bargaining with government. On the other hand, demand groups, they are more or less ad hoc. They are spontaneous, and then they first agitate and then they bargain. So many a times the leadership develops from the situation rather than it is structured like interest group. So it means, can I say interest groups and demand groups are different in India? So why the demand groups are rising in India? You know that in India, the informal associations or informal production is much higher than formal production. If it is 10%, these are 90%. So because of the existence of informal production, we have more of demand groups. Second is, in the formal, that is interest groups, the state domination is very high. Why? Because the credit and then policy, both of them are in the control of the state. Let me put it this way. If you take policy, now most of the policies in India, they come from government initiative rather than from the initiative of the society. So they flow from the government initiative. That is the first thing. Policy flows from government initiative. And the second thing is, if you take LIC or Union Trust, all these are the government agencies or public sector banks. So most of the private sector companies, they run on the credit from these public sector institutions. And you know, public sector companies still play a dominant role. So that's the reason why most of the economy in India is still dominated by the state. Now, because of this, these interest groups, these are working in close association with the state rather than working or pressurizing the state. So that's why they are more of command politics. Do you agree with this, me? It means, what I want to say is, interest groups work in close alignment with the state. But if you take farmers' organizations, these are more like demand groups. So they are unable to work with the government in an organized manner. So that's the reason why they are agitating. And this agitation is spearheaded by some political parties. So this agitation is not continuous. It is spontaneous, ad hoc, but the momentary strength exists for it. So the demand groups are very strong in India. So let's take when Chaudhary Charan Singh, he was around 80th birthday, people from Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, they have brought the tractors to the Delhi. So this is a kind of an agitation, farmer agitation. So Rasta Rokos, Padayatras, Hartals, all these are undertaken by demand groups. So demand groups dominate the pluralistic space in India. That is my point. You need to talk about this. Now, you need to develop another point over here. Though the demand groups are strong in India, why they are unable to create impact? So can I say, the number of demand groups are increasing and there is no collective action from these demand groups. So when too many demand groups comes up, obviously one group can be played against the other group. So small, multi or else too many interest group or demand groups is actually taking away their vigor and vitality. Yes or no? So this is what Miss Rudolph and Rudolph, they call it as involuted pluralism. It means there is an expansion of the civil society space, but the impact created by the civil society on people and the state is not so much. So this is how this has been stated. So this is in a nutshell about this chapter. Now the questions which you need to think about is, what are the weaknesses of civil society in India? And how the pressure groups, interest groups, and demand groups are different? Because demand groups are the movement groups. These are issue groups. Pressure groups are organized producer groups. So how they are different from India? Express your opinions. So why demand groups are strong in India compared to the other groups? And finally, what is involuted pluralism means? Why the state is still able to dominate the policy and also the interest groups in India? So these are the questions you have to think about. So if possible, you can express your opinions. If any innovation is there in your opinions, I can learn from you. So I think there is some discussion board created below that and you can post your opinions. And this debate will be made available to you at laex.in/CivilsPrep. Now, so when you post your opinions over there, then I will be definitely reading them, and I will be looking into that to understand your perspective on the issue. It is majorly to learn from you. Thank you very much and all the best.